I do not know why I speak tonight. Perhaps it is because I feel my time drawing near. Though centuries have passed without an end. Or perhaps it is because of you, kind boy, sitting across from me with your gentle eyes, not knowing what blood flows in your veins. You ask me for stories, and so I will tell you one. The first story. The night I stopped being a woman and became something else. It was Bohemia, in the year of war and betrayal. The land had already begun to burn with the fire of the 30 Years' War. Though in our village, the fighting had not yet reached us. My house was small, tucked near the edge of the woods, where wild mushrooms grew thick after the rain. My daughter and I lived there, simple as could be. I worked as a cook in the manor house of a Protestant noble family. They were my employers, my protectors, or so I thought. My daughter, my only child, had hair the color of chestnuts in autumn, and a laugh that rang brighter than the church bells. I had raised her alone, for her father was gone long before she could speak. To me, she was everything. But war makes cowards and liars of us all. The noble family, frightened for their daughter when the Catholics began to tighten their grip, made a terrible choice. They smuggled their own child away to Holland, safe and hidden. And in her place, they took mine. I did not know until it was too late. The mob came one cold evening, crying out, "Witch! Witch!" I ran to the square, heart pounding, only to see my daughter, my sweet girl, bound at the stake, her eyes wide with terror. They had dressed her in borrowed clothes, as if she were their daughter, and whispered poison into the ears of the villagers. "See how she gathers herbs in the woods," they cried. "See how she speaks strangely, how she charms the animals." Lies, all lies. But the people were hungry for a scapegoat, and the firewood was already piled high. I tried to rush forward, but strong arms held me back. I screamed until my throat was raw, until I could no longer hear anything over the roar of flames. She did not cry out. My daughter, my brave, beautiful child, kept her eyes on me, even as the fire took her. And then she was gone. That night, I stumbled back to our house by the woods. The silence pressed on me, heavy as stone. The earth still held a dying ember, glowing faintly in the dark. I sat before it, trembling, and for the first time in my life, I cursed God. And when I cursed, something listened. I do not know if it was the devil, as the priests preached, or some older spirit, born of the earth and the storm. But when I spoke, when I screamed that I wanted vengeance, that I wanted to make every guilty soul burn as my daughter burned, the wind rose. The fire in the hearth leapt high, though I had added no wood. Shadows crawled along the walls, whispering in tongues I had never heard. And then a voice, low, patient, cruel. Your child was taken for being what she was not. Do you wish to become what they feared? I answered, yes, without hesitation. The voice laughed, or perhaps it was thunder. My hand burned, as if marked, though no scar remained. And when I stepped outside, the night itself bent around me. The owls turned their heads. The wolves in the hills howled as if they knew. I was no longer the same. From that night forward, I was what they accused my daughter of being. A witch. But not the kind they had feared. At least, not at first. I did not fly on a broom or dance naked beneath the moon. No, my witchcraft was quieter, deeper. A whisper in a man's ear that drove him to sickness. A shadow cast across the doorway of a traitor, that no harvest would grow in his field. A dream slipped into the minds of the guilty. That robbed them of rest. I began with those who had held me back from the pyre. They fell, one by one, and always I whisper the same vow as I watched them wither. As my daughter burned, so shall your line burn after you. That was the birth of my curse. The curse that has followed your family, boy, down through the centuries, until it has reached you. But I am old now. I have seen so much, and I do not know if vengeance has given me justice, or only chained me in grief. Still, that night in Bohemia lives in me, every moment. The night I ceased to be a mother, and became a witch. You ask why I left Bohemia, why I did not wither in grief and die as other mothers did. I had made my pact, and with it came not only power, but a burden to walk and keep walking. The fire had taken my daughter, but I had not forgotten who kindled it. My employers, the noble family who had fed me scraps while I cooked their feasts, had fled. Their daughter, I learned, was smuggled away to Holland, hidden among kin in Amsterdam, safe and warm, while my child's ashes scattered in the cold. I could not rest, not while she lived, free of the flames that had devoured mine. So I followed the whispers of merchants and travelers, a trail of ships that left the Rhine and sailed to the sea. Weeks passed. I begged. I bartered. I cloaked myself in shadows when silver would not suffice. And at last, I arrived in Amsterdam. The city of canals, glistening like black ribbons under the moonlight. Tall houses leaned over the water, their gables sharp against the sky. The streets smelled of fish and tar, of horses and pipe smoke. There was music too. Fiddles and laughter spilled from taverns. But I felt no joy. My heart was a furnace still, burning only with vengeance. I found her quickly, the daughter of the house where I had once bent my back over boiling pots. She walked the streets in silks finer than any cloth I had ever touched. Her hair bound with pearls. She smiled. She laughed. She lived. and I cursed her. It was easy. Almost too easy. A whisper on the wind as she crossed a bridge at dusk. Her shadow falling across the water. I called upon the same voice that had answered me in Bohemia, and it coiled gladly around my words. Within a fortnight, she took sick. Her body wasted, her face hollowed. They called doctors, apothecaries, priests. None could save her. By the next full moon, she was dead. I thought I had avenged my daughter. But fate is a sly creature. In my fury, I had overlooked another. A child born to her bloodline, kept hidden in the countryside, far from the city. A girl too young to be noticed, too young to be cursed by my hate. She survived. Her name I never learned then, but she would live on, and through her, the family's line would stretch long enough to reach even this place, even you. It was only years later that I understood. Vengeance is never as neat as fire. It smolders. It spreads. It clings like smoke. Yet, Holland was not only a place of curses. It was also where I first learned that my powers could be used differently. One winter night, I heard cries in an alley, harsh voices, a child's whimper. I crept closer and saw a girl, scarcely older than 10, accused by her neighbors of witchcraft. They claimed she spoiled their milk, that she brought sickness to their animals. I knew the lies well. They were the same lies spoken about my daughter. The crowd raised sticks and stones. The child shook with terror, her hands bound with rope. I remembered Bohemia, the flames, the helplessness. Not this time. I whispered a spell, and the torches in their hands sputtered out, as if drowned by unseen rain. Shadows wreathed along the walls, and the men stumbled back, pale with fear. "The devil walks here," one muttered, and they scattered into the night. I cut the ropes from the child's wrists. She looked at me with wide eyes, too frightened to speak. I touched her cheek, but I did not tell her my name. It was better she never knew. She ran, vanishing into the labyrinth of streets. Free. For now. It was the first time I had used my curse for something other than revenge. And it haunted me almost as much as the fire had. Could I have saved my daughter that way? Could I have stopped the flames with just one spell? One whisper of power? I will never know. But Holland grew dangerous for me. Whispers of a dark woman who cursed noble daughters and frightened mobs began to spread. The city was not safe. Not with watchful priests and men eager to hunt witches. So I boarded a ship, not as a passenger, but hidden among barrels in the hold. The vessel's sails billowed against the gray sea, bound not for Bohemia, not for France, but for a new world across the ocean. Salem, they called it. A place whispered of in taverns. A colony of piety, where the people were as frigid as the timbers of their meeting houses. I thought I might disappear there, among strangers, across a sea that stretched further than the imagination. But as you know, boy, fate does not let witches rest. And so I went across the waters to Salem. The sea was cruel to me, as it is to all who cross it. Weeks upon weeks in the damp hold of that ship. The stench of brine and rot thick in my throat. I thought I might go mad in the darkness, but I endured, as witches do. I arrived at last on a jagged shore, where the trees groaned like old men, and the air carried the scent of pine and smoke. Salem, they called it. It was no city like Amsterdam, no marketplace of color and noise. Salem was severe. Wooden houses standing stiff against the cold. Meeting houses bare as bone. The people dressed in black and prayed with a fervor so sharp it could cut flesh. They believed every misfortune was the devil's hand. Every illness his mark. Every woman his vessel. I told myself to keep hidden, to bow my head, to speak little, to live as a widow might. But no witch can ever hide forever. I found her in whispers first. A woman older than I, shunned by her neighbors, accused more times than I could count, yet never caught in the flames. They called her Mother Charity, with lips curled in disdain, though none dared say it to her face. She lived at the edge of the settlement, near the marsh where reeds whispered in the night. And I knew her for what she was. The moment I looked into her eyes, one of my kind. It was in her hut, small and crooked, that I learned the art of the crystal. A sphere of glass, polished smooth as water, that drank the light of the moon and returned it as visions. Mother Charity placed it before me on a night when the stars seemed too near, their silver light piercing through the cracks in her roof. "Look," she said, her voice like dry leaves, "and see what clings to your soul." At first, I saw nothing but shadows swirling in the depths. Then, the glass bloomed with images. A city with spires, streets wet with rain, and faces pale beneath powdered wigs. London. And then her, the one I had missed, the child from Amsterdam, grown now into a woman. I saw her standing on a balcony, laughter on her lips, jewels at her throat. She had survived, married into wealth, and her children, tall, strong, full of life, gathered around her. My heart clenched with rage and despair. I had thought vengeance done, the line broken, the debt paid, but no. The bloodline endured. The same blood that had tricked my daughter to her death. The same blood that had watched her burn. I slammed my hand against the table, the crystal trembling. "She lives." I spat. Mother Charity only smiled, her teeth crooked as old nails. "Blood is stubborn. It grows like weeds. Even when you think the earth had been salted, you can burn a field, child, but truths run deep." Her words haunted me. They haunt me still. But Salem was not only a place of visions. It was a place of fire, of accusation. I watched as neighbor turned upon neighbor, as girls pointed their trembling fingers and screamed, "Witch!" Men dragged women from their beds, bound their wrists, and questioned them with sounds sharp as daggers. And I, a true witch, walked among them unseen. There were nights when I could not bear it. I watched mothers torn from children, Innocent women forced to confess to lies they never spoke. Sometimes I whispered words to loosen the knot of ropes, to cloud the eyes of judges. But I could not save them all. Salem wanted blood, and blood it drank. One night, they came for Mother Charity. The torches glared like suns. The dogs barked, and the men shouted her name. But she did not scream when they dragged her away. She pressed the crystal bowl into my hands before they bound her. Her eyes fierce. "Keep looking," she whispered. The next morning, she was gone, hanged like the rest. I stayed no longer. The walls of Salem closed in on me, and though no hand pointed my way, I felt their suspicion thick as smoke. I took the crystal and left, slipping into the night. London called me. The vision burned in my mind. The woman I had missed, her children laughing, her bloodline thriving. My vengeance was unfinished, and I was bound to follow. So, across the sea once more I went, to the heart of an empire, to London's crowded streets. London was nothing like Salem. Here Salem was a village of suspicion. London was a beast that breathed greed and hunger in every direction. The stench of smoke and sewage clung to the narrow alleys, while the bells of St. Paul's tolled over the clamoring streets. Wealth glittered in one quarter, filth rotted in another. The poor begged at the feet of silk-draped ladies. The rich rolled past in gilded carriages, their powdered wigs bobbing, their faces painted pale as masks. I arrived with nothing but my crystal and my anger. I told myself I would not leave until her line was broken. And soon enough, I found her. The child I had missed in Amsterdam. But she was no longer a child. Time had grown her into a woman, older than I appeared. Her hair streaked with silver, her skin softened by years of indulgence. While I wandered through centuries unchanged, she bore the mark of mortality with every step. I followed her from afar, my breath shallow with fury. She lived in a grand house of stone, windows glowing with candlelight, servants bowing low at her passing. She feasted night after night, her table crowded with meats and pies, sugared fruits, and wines red as blood. Wealth had made her suffer, and wealth had given her an appetite she could not control. It should have been my curse that ended her. I was ready. I had words on my tongue, sharpened and blackened by years of hatred. I crept into her garden one evening, where ivy crawled up the walls, and laughter spilled from open windows. I saw her through the glass, jeweled fingers clutching at her breast as she gasped for air. But it was not my curse that struck her. It was her own body, betrayed by excess. Too much meat, too much wine, too much comfort. She collapsed into her feast, her eyes wide with terror, and within moments the house was in chaos. Servants screamed, physicians were called, all in vain. I did not kill her. Fate did. And yet, I felt no peace. I went to the graveyard as the mourners gathered in their fine black cloaks. The sky was gray, heavy with mist, and the scent of damp earth filled the air. I stood apart, hidden beneath my hood, as they lowered her into the ground. Around her coffin stood her children and her grandchildren, faces pale, voices low. They wept, though I wondered if it was grief or inheritance they mourned. That night, when the graveyard emptied, I lingered among the tombstones. I pressed my hands to the soil, damp and cold, and whispered the words I had carried across oceans and years. Your line burned, my daughter. Your line shall burn itself. The curse slithered from my lips like smoke. The earth seemed to tremble beneath my palms. And in the weeks that followed, the curse bore fruit. One by one, her children fell. Illness took them. Sudden fevers that no physician could explain. Accidents claimed others. A carriage overturned. A fall from a horse. A fire in a townhouse. But curses are never perfect. They slip. They miss. They find cracks to pour through. There was one grandson who did not come to the funeral. He was far away, serving as a soldier in France. A proud officer on some campaign along the blooded fields. The curse had not touched him. Not yet. I realized too late that he lived, and so my journey turned once more. If the curse could not find him, then I would. France awaited me, and with it, the soldier who carried the last thread of the bloodline I had sworn to end. Paris in the 18th century was a city swollen with brilliance and rot. Candles glowed from gilded salons where philosophers debated liberty and kings dined on gold plates, while filth ran through the gutters outside, and beggars starved in the shadows. I arrived with one name on my lips: the soldier who had escaped me. I found him not on the battlefield, but in the boudoir of Paris. He was a man of appetite, this grandson of my enemy. His sword was drawn as often in taverns and in women's chambers as it ever was in war. A smile and a coin could buy him anything, and he left behind a trail of whispers, broken hearts, and swelling bellies. I watched from the edge of ballrooms, from dark corners of wine shops. I saw him laugh, boast, and drink as though he were untouchable. But no man is untouchable from me. The first child was born to a laundress who lived above a bakery near the Seine. I crept to her cradle one night, when the infant's cries echoed faintly in the damp air. I whispered my curse, and by morning, the child's breath was gone, leaving only silence. The second was in Rouen, a girl with hair like wheat. I found her as a toddler, skipping stones by the river. A fever took her within a week. Then another, and another. Lyon, Marseille, Lille. Each place the soldier marched, each city he left behind. Another bastard child bore his blood, and I made sure their light was snuffed before it could burn. And then there was the American girl. She was young, merely out of girlhood. Her cheeks run with innocence, and her dresses heavy with wealth. She came to Paris with her father, a railroad baron whose fortune crossed oceans. The soldier courted her in secret, whispering sweet words and promises of forever. She believed him. They always did. But the Baron discovered them. He tore her away from Paris, shipping her back to America under threat of disinheritance. She wept. She begged. But he would not relent. He would not allow her to ruin the family's name. Little did he know, she was already pregnant. In America, far beyond my reach, the girl carried the seed of my enemy. The Baron, true to his word, disowned her. And when she wrote to the soldier, hoping he would save her, his reply was cold as winter. Without her inheritance, she was nothing to him. He cast her aside, as he had all the others. But then, I had ended the lives of every other child I found. One by one, they were gone, their small bodies taken by fevers, drownings, accidents. The city whispered of bad luck that followed the soldier, though he laughed and lived on. But curses linger. They wait. They gather strength in the cracks of a man's life. When at last I turned my gaze upon him, I did not need to strike with my hands. He had aged into dissipation. His once handsome face swollen with drink. His body sagging from years of indulgence. Women no longer swooned for him. Creditors circled him like vultures. He tried to laugh it off, to charm his way free. But even he could not escape the slow tightening of fate. I watched him fall. He collapsed in a Paris alley one spring morning, his heart seizing like his grandmother's had years before. Not by my hand, but by the weight of his own life. Still, I whispered over his body, my curls curling like smoke into his departing breath. Your line is broken. Your seed is ash. You will burn as my daughter burned. I believed it then. I believed I had ended them all. But oceans are wide, and curses cannot always cross them. In America, hidden by wealth and shame, the unborn child grew. My vengeance had missed its mark once again. And so, when whispers of the new world reached me, of fortunes made and futures written on fresh soil, I knew my journey was not yet over. France had given me blood, but America would give me the last thread I must sever. Yes, just as you are now, across from me. Look at me closely, for I have something to tell you that no one else has ever heard. You see, I was not always this way. Old, bent, heavy with years. Once, long ago, I was like any other woman. I had a daughter, and together we lived quietly in a house by the woods in Bohemia. But when the war came, and the fires of suspicion burned brighter than reason, my daughter was taken from me. They said she was a witch. They bound her and set her alight. And I, powerless, watched her burn. That night, I called upon the devil. I gave my soul to power, so that I might curse those who wronged us, and their children after them, until not one drop of their blood remained in this world. And the devil, cruel as he is clever, agreed. But he set a price. I would not die until my vengeance was complete. My life would stretch as long as the bloodline endured. And so I wandered to Holland, where the noble daughter had been sent in my child's place. I cursed her and her kin. To Salem, where witches taught me the crystal ball, and in its light I saw where the line had fled. To London, to Paris, I hunted them, one by one, and when I found them, I whispered my curses into their bones. Many were children, innocent and unknowing, but I told myself it must be done. Yet still, one always slipped away. Always another branch, another descendant. And so my years lengthened, my hair silvered, my hands wrinkled. I watched empires crumble, cities rise, and still I could not rest. And now, here I am. Here you are, the last of them. You live not as they once did, in wealth and comfort, but in hardship. I see your mother, bent with work, giving all she has to feed you. I see you, with your books and your kind eyes, helping me carry my basket, offering me bread, never once suspecting who I am. It would be easy, child. One word, one gesture, and you will fall. And then I would finally die. I would at last be free. And my weary soul would sink into the earth beside my daughter's ashes. But when I look at you, I cannot. You are innocent, as she was. You are kind, as she was. To curse you would be to curse her again. I cannot. So I will tell you this instead. I will not harm you. I will not curse you. Though it means I will go on living, year after year, with no end in sight. I will spare you. More than that, I will protect you. I will guard your children, and their children after them. The curse I once carried will become a shield. I am tired, child. So very tired. I regret the little ones whose lives I ended in my rage, whose only sin was the blood they carried. That regret will haunt me longer than death ever could. But in sparing you, perhaps I can make peace with myself. Perhaps I can give back to the world what I once took from it. So remember my words, and remember me, the witch who should have cursed you, but choose instead to keep you safe. And though the devil waits for me to finish what I began, he will wait in vain, for my life, endless though it may be, now belongs to you.